The smell of Thanksgiving dinner filled the room, but I could barely taste the food. My family was gathered around the table, as usual, but the conversation always seemed to sidestep me. I was 27 years old, still working a dead-end job at a local electronics store while everyone else seemed to have it all figured out. My sister, Sophia, was already climbing the corporate ladder, her latest promotion at a tech firm plastered all over social media. And there I was, stuck. "Look at Emma, still on her phone," Sophia scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "How long are you going to keep pretending this retail job is enough? When are you going to act your age and get a real career?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every word felt like a slap, but I knew better than to engage. I glanced down at my phone, the one thing that kept me grounded. An email from Apple's development team popped up on the screen. They were interested in my app, the one I'd been working on secretly for months. But I didn't share that with anyone. Every time I brought up my dreams, they were shot down. Sophia would laugh, and my parents would give me the "it's just a phase" treatment. They had no idea what I was working on or how much it meant to me. "She's probably just playing games," Sophia laughed, reaching for another roll. "Last year, she said she was learning to code. Can you believe that?" Their laughter stung, but I kept quiet. They didn't understand. No one did. But I had been learning, teaching myself programming through online courses, building an AI-powered inventory management system from scratch. It wasn't just a hobby, it was my ticket out. It was the future. I looked at my phone again, my fingers trembling as I typed a quick reply to Alice, my manager. Tomorrow was the big day. The email from Apple wasn't just a friendly inquiry, it was a sign that my hard work was finally paying off. Before I share what happened next, the moment that completely flipped the script on everything, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. As I sat there, pretending to enjoy dinner, I couldn't help but think of how far I'd come. The nights spent coding, the doubts I'd silenced, the countless times I'd been told I wasn't good enough. I wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. Tomorrow, everything would change. I'd show them all. I'd show Sophia, I'd show my parents, and most importantly, I'd show myself. That night, sleep came in fragments, my mind constantly drifting back to the meeting that would decide everything. I kept picturing myself in that Apple conference room, walking in with my laptop under my arm, and confidently presenting my AI-powered inventory system. But with each imagined scenario, doubt crept in. What if they didn't get it? What if they laughed me off just like everyone else had? But no. I pushed that thought away. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let fear stop me now. Every late night, every frustrating line of code that I fixed, this was my moment. I didn't need validation from anyone else. Not from Sophia. Not from my parents. This was about proving to myself that I was capable, that I could succeed on my own terms. The next morning, I barely ate. The butterflies in my stomach were more like a swarm, but I kept my focus. I double-checked everything, my presentation, my laptop, my notes, and left the house before anyone woke up. I didn't want to give them the chance to question me, to tell me I was wasting my time. As I stepped into the quiet morning air, the cool breeze felt like a breath of fresh hope. This was it. I was finally taking control of my future. The drive to the city felt like an eternity. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I kept replaying the pitch in my head, adjusting my words, imagining their questions, preparing for every possible scenario. I was ready for this. I had to be. When I arrived at Apple's headquarters, the sleek glass building towering above me, I couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and disbelief. This was real. I was here. The weight of it all pressed down on me, but I didn't let it show. I walked through the lobby with my head held high, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder like it was the most normal thing in the world. I was led to a conference room where a group of executives waited. I set up my laptop, took a deep breath, and began. I spoke with confidence, explaining how my system didn't just track inventory, it predicted customer behavior, optimized supply chains, and adapted to real-time market changes. With each slide, I could see their interest growing. Their eyes widened as I demonstrated the AI's ability to analyze patterns and adjust accordingly. It wasn't just an inventory system, it was a revolution in how retail could operate. When I finished, the room fell silent for a moment. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for their response. Would they offer me a job? Would they dismiss my work as something unpolished? Finally, the chief technology officer spoke. This is impressive, Emma. We've seen a lot of inventory systems, but none that do this. We'd like to make you an offer, not just for the system, but to join us as a deputy director of retail innovation. You'd be working alongside some of the brightest minds in the industry. I couldn't believe it. My head was spinning, but I forced myself to stay calm. They were offering me a position at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. My dream was becoming a reality. Before I could fully absorb what was happening, the CTO added, and we plan to implement your system across all Apple stores and partner retailers by next quarter. This is just the beginning, Emma. I sat there in stunned silence, feeling a wave of relief, pride, and disbelief all at once. The work I'd done in secret, the late nights, the endless testing, the moments when I almost gave up, it had all led me here. To this moment. I left the meeting with a signed contract, a new position at Apple, and a future that suddenly felt limitless. As I stepped outside the building, I took a deep breath, savoring the feeling of finally having made it. But there was still one thing I had to do. I had to go home. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from Lila. They'll see it soon. I'm so proud of you. I smiled, my fingers trembling as I typed my reply. This is just the beginning. But there was a part of me that couldn't wait any longer. It was time to show my family what I had done, what they'd missed. It wasn't about rubbing my success in their faces. It was about proving to them, once and for all, that I wasn't the same person they had written off. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next few days felt like a dream. I walked into work at Harris Electronics with a quiet confidence I'd never known before. I wasn't just a retail worker anymore, I was someone who had just secured a groundbreaking deal with Apple. The weight of the achievement settled into my bones, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But even in my newfound success, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sophia's words from Thanksgiving still echoed in my mind. Her condescending tone, the way she dismissed my dreams like they were nothing more than fantasies. I hadn't told her about the Apple meeting, hell, I hadn't told anyone, but I could feel her presence lurking in the background, watching, waiting. It wasn't until a week later that I found out just how much she had been watching. It was a Thursday morning when I received the first message. It was from Nathan, a friend of mine who worked in the corporate office at Harris Electronics. He'd been a quiet supporter of my project, always asking questions and offering advice, but nothing had prepared me for what he said next. Emma, the message read, I think you need to know something. Sophia came by the office last week. She was asking a lot of questions about your app. I thought it was strange, but then I found out she was trying to access your work computer. She's been acting suspicious, like she's trying to figure out what you're really working on. My stomach dropped. Sophia. Of course. I should have known. She'd always been the type to step on anyone who got too close to success, especially if it threatened her. But this was different. She was actively trying to sabotage me. I sat there, stunned, staring at the screen. How long had she been spying on me? How much did she really know? I could feel the weight of the betrayal settling in, cold and heavy. I thought I had finally found a way to prove myself, to rise above the family's judgment, but Sophia's actions shattered that illusion. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Should I tell my parents? Or should I just let this play out and show them all that I could succeed without their help? My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Lila. Her face was full of concern as she stepped into the room, her eyes searching mine for answers. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but knowing. She'd always been the one person I could trust, the one person who saw the real me behind all the noise. "I found out about Sophia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She's been trying to sabotage me. She came to the office. She's been digging around my work, acting like she's trying to help, but I know what she's really after." Lila's eyes darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You knew she wouldn't let you get away with this. She's always been about competition, always tried to make sure she stayed on top. But this is different, Emma. She's crossing a line." I nodded, the sting of betrayal sharp in my chest. "I don't know what to do. I thought she'd be happy for me, you know? But now I realize, she's afraid. She's afraid that I'm going to do something she can't control. That I'm going to prove everyone wrong. Prove her wrong." Lila sat down next to me, her hand finding mine in a comforting gesture. "You don't have to do anything. Just keep doing what you've been doing. You're on the right path. The world is about to see what you've been building. Let Sophia play her games. She can't take away what you've already accomplished." Her words were a balm to my wounded pride, but a part of me still wanted to confront Sophia. To show her that I wasn't just her little sister anymore, that I wasn't the naive girl she could dismiss with a laugh. Later that evening, after I'd calmed down, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. The girl who had once doubted herself, the girl who had let her family's dismissals weigh her down, was gone. In her place was someone who had just secured a future with one of the most powerful companies in the world. Someone who had a voice, and wasn't afraid to use it. The next morning, I received another message from Nathan. He'd sent over the security footage from the corporate office. It showed Sophia, sitting at a desk, her fingers furiously typing on my work computer. She had been trying to access my files, searching for anything that might give her the upper hand. I stared at the video, my anger building with each second. She didn't just doubt me, she was actively trying to destroy everything I'd worked for. And now, I knew the truth. Sophia wasn't just a sister who didn't understand. She was a threat. And I wasn't going to let her ruin everything I had worked so hard for. But as I sat there, staring at the screen, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving her wrong. It was about moving forward, showing everyone that I didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. Tomorrow, everything would change. Not just for me, but for her too. The morning after discovering Sophia's betrayal, I woke up with a newfound clarity. The anger I had felt the day before had settled into something more resolute, a quiet, unwavering determination. I wasn't going to let her sabotage me. I wasn't going to let anyone hold me back. Not anymore. I had worked too hard, put in too many sleepless nights, faced too many doubts to let someone like her dictate my future. And as much as it stung, her actions had given me the clarity I needed. It wasn't about confronting her, it wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about focusing on what mattered, the work I had done, the future I was creating, and the path that lay ahead. With every passing minute, I could feel the weight of my decision settle over me like a heavy cloak. I had a meeting with Apple tomorrow, and nothing was going to stop me from stepping into that room with my head held high, ready to show the world what I had built. I had already proven to myself that I could do this. Now, it was time to prove it to everyone else. I sat down at my desk and pulled up my laptop. The system was almost ready. A few final tweaks, a little more testing, and it would be perfect. I'd already made the decision, I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to shrink into the background and let my family, or anyone else, tell me what I could or couldn't do. I was going to succeed on my own terms. But I knew that making this decision wasn't going to be easy. There would be more obstacles, more people who doubted me. Sophia was just the beginning. My family's expectations, their constant push for me to conform to what they thought was best for me, it would all continue. But that didn't matter. I was done playing small. I was ready to step into my own light. The hours leading up to the meeting were a blur. I worked furiously, making sure every part of the system was flawless, every number and prediction precise. I could feel the excitement bubbling up inside me as I thought about the possibilities ahead, what this could mean for the future of retail, for the businesses that had been held back by outdated systems. And most importantly, for me. Before I knew it, the day had arrived. I stood in front of the mirror, taking one last look at my reflection. I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. She was different, stronger, more confident. The doubts that had once plagued me were gone. I wasn't just Emma anymore. I was someone who had the power to change the world. As I left my apartment and headed for the meeting, my phone buzzed with messages from my family. I ignored them. It didn't matter. They wouldn't understand, and that was fine. This wasn't for them. It was for me. The drive to Apple's headquarters was quiet, my thoughts racing with everything I had to say. But beneath the nerves, there was a calm certainty. I had earned this. I had earned my place at that table. When I arrived at the building, the glass doors loomed ahead of me, symbolizing the shift that was about to take place. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest, but this time, it was different. The anxiety I had once felt was replaced by a quiet confidence. This was my moment. The conference room was filled with executives, people who were experts in their field, people who had seen it all. I didn't let the weight of their presence intimidate me. I set my laptop down on the table, took a deep breath, and began. The words came easily, flowing from me as I explained the system I had created. I spoke with authority, with passion, about the possibilities it held, not just for Apple, but for the future of retail. The more I spoke, the more I could see them leaning forward, intrigued, impressed. This wasn't just an app. It was a game changer. When I finished, there was a brief silence. I didn't flinch. I held my ground, waiting for their response. Finally, the chief technology officer spoke. "We're impressed, Emma. This is exactly the kind of innovation we've been looking for. We'd like to offer you a position, not just as a developer, but as Deputy Director of Retail Innovation. You'll be working alongside some of the best minds in the industry." I couldn't believe it. My dream was becoming a reality. But I didn't let the shock show. I smiled, nodded, and accepted. This was the moment I had worked for, the moment I had fought for. And nothing was going to take it away from me. As I walked out of the building, I felt the weight of everything I had overcome lift off my shoulders. I had made it. This wasn't just about the job offer, it was about proving to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. Tomorrow, everything would change. And as for Sophia? She'd have to learn that the only person who could stop me was me. And I wasn't stopping for anything or anyone. The morning of the Apple meeting arrived with a strange sense of calm, as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to take the next step. I woke up early, nerves buzzing under the surface, but I quickly pushed them aside. There was no room for doubt anymore. I had earned this moment, and I was ready to prove it. As I walked into Apple's headquarters, the grandeur of the building seemed to swallow me whole. The towering glass walls reflected my image back at me, making me feel smaller than I was, but I didn't let it rattle me. This was where I belonged. This was the moment I had worked for. I was ushered into a sleek conference room, where the team of Apple executives was already seated, their eyes fixed on me. There were no friendly faces, no signs of recognition. Just professionals. People who had seen it all. And they were about to see something completely new. I set my laptop on the table and took a deep breath. My hands were steady as I began the presentation. As the slides filled the screen, I talked about the AI-powered inventory system I had developed, not just as a tool to track stock, but as a system capable of predicting customer behavior, optimizing supply chains, and adapting in real time to changing market conditions. This wasn't just an app, it was the future of retail. The executives sat up straighter with every feature I demonstrated. I could see their eyes light up as I showcased the system's ability to analyze customer preferences and adapt stock levels based on external factors like weather patterns and local events. The potential was staggering. This wasn't some half-baked idea, it was a fully realized, game-changing system. As I wrapped up the presentation, there was a brief moment of silence, and for a split second, I thought I might have lost them. But then, the chief technology officer leaned forward, his face full of interest. "This is impressive, Emma," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We've seen a lot of inventory systems, but nothing like this. The capabilities you've built into this system go far beyond just tracking stock. The way it integrates customer data, the way it predicts demand, this is exactly what the future of retail needs." My heart raced in my chest, but I stayed focused. This was it. The validation I had always wanted, the recognition that my work had meaning, that it wasn't just some foolish dream. I had proven myself. The CTO continued. "We want to offer you not just a deal for your system, but a position with us. We'd like to make you the Deputy Director of Retail Innovation, working alongside our team to implement this system across all of Apple's stores and partner retailers." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I was speechless. The weight of it all settled over me like a blanket. Not only had I impressed them, but they were offering me a chance to help shape the future of Apple's retail strategy. But that wasn't all. The CTO looked at me, his expression serious. "This isn't just an offer for the system. We're prepared to implement it immediately, starting next quarter. This is a company-wide initiative, Emma. We want you to lead it. You'll be working on a global scale, with the kind of resources you could only dream of." I blinked, the reality of the moment finally crashing into me. The years of struggle, the nights of doubting myself, the countless hours I'd spent coding, it had all led to this. And here I was, sitting across from some of the most powerful people in the industry, being offered a seat at the table. Not just as a developer, but as a leader. As I nodded in agreement, my mind raced with everything I had just heard. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a recognition of everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. This was the moment I had always dreamed of, but it wasn't just about getting the offer. It was about the journey that had brought me here. As I left the conference room, I couldn't help but smile. My phone buzzed with a message from Lila, and I couldn't wait to share the news with her. "They've offered me the job," I typed back, my fingers trembling as I hit send. "And they want to implement the system immediately. It's happening." I stepped into the elevator, my heart still racing as the doors closed behind me. This was only the beginning. The work I had done, the years of feeling overlooked and underestimated, those days were over. I was no longer the girl who worked in a retail store with big dreams. I was the one who had made those dreams a reality. As I walked out of the building, my mind raced with what came next. The world was changing, and I had just taken my first step into that future. Tomorrow, everything would be different. And for the first time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The days after the meeting felt like a whirlwind. I could barely catch my breath before the next big thing happened. Apple wasn't just impressed, they were moving forward, implementing my system across their stores, making plans to scale it globally. Every step I took seemed to push me farther from the girl I used to be, the one who doubted herself, the one who had to hide her dreams behind a mask of mediocrity. But as much as the world was changing for me, there was one place I hadn't been able to escape: home. I had kept the news of the offer to myself, knowing full well how my family would react. They wouldn't understand. They never did. But that didn't stop the flood of messages that came pouring in once the announcement hit the press. I hadn't expected them to call immediately, but when my phone buzzed with a message from Sophia, my stomach twisted. I had a feeling this wouldn't be a congratulatory text. Her message was brief, but it carried an undertone of panic. "Emma, I saw the announcement. What's going on? Why didn't you tell us?" My hand shook slightly as I stared at the screen. What was there to say? How could I explain to her that the very system she'd mocked was now changing the future of retail? That the dream she'd so casually dismissed was now a reality? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I set my phone down and stared out the window, letting the weight of everything sink in. My parents, my sister, they had never believed in me. They'd always seen my ambitions as little more than childish fantasies. And now, they were seeing the truth, but not from me. They had to learn the hard way, and somehow, that felt like the most satisfying part of all. Later that evening, as I walked into my apartment, I saw the flashing red light on my voicemail. It was my mother. I hesitated, knowing what was coming. "Emma, we need to talk," her voice crackled through the speaker. "Your father and we saw the news about Apple. This is a lot to take in. We're worried about you. You didn't think to mention this to us?" I could hear the frustration in her voice, the hurt. But it wasn't just concern for me, it was concern for them. For their image, their place in the world. For years, they'd expected me to follow a certain path, to conform to what they believed was best for me. And now, I had stepped off that path. I had done something that they couldn't control, couldn't predict, and it terrified them. It wasn't about my success, it was about them facing the fact that I was no longer the daughter they could push into the mold they had created for me. The phone rang again, and this time I answered. I didn't know how to face them, but I knew I had to. "Emma, honey," my mother said, her voice softer now. "We didn't mean to make you feel like we didn't support you. We just—" "Mom," I interrupted, my voice steady, "I didn't do this for you. Or for anyone else. I did this for me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could feel her processing my words, trying to make sense of them. She wasn't used to hearing me speak like this. She wasn't used to hearing me stand up for myself. But I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who silently let their criticisms and doubts shape her. "I know," she said after a moment. We thought you were playing with something that wasn't real. That it wasn't going to lead anywhere." "And now?" I asked, my voice quieter, but no less firm. "Do you still think that?" There was another long silence. "No," she finally admitted. "I guess I was wrong." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For so long, I had craved their approval, their acknowledgement. But hearing my mother admit she was wrong felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. It wasn't about revenge or rubbing it in their faces. It was about me proving to myself that I didn't need their validation to succeed. The conversation shifted to my next steps, how they could help, how they could be involved. But there was something different in her tone now. It wasn't the same dismissive tone that had haunted me for years. It wasn't the same expectation that I would follow the path they'd laid out for me. Now, there was a tentative respect. A recognition that I was more than they had ever imagined. I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. My family would have to adjust, and so would I. But for the first time, I felt like I was on my own path, one that no one could take away from me. As the conversation ended, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights below. I had done it. I had stepped into my future, and I wasn't looking back. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more lessons. But it didn't matter. I had already faced the hardest part, proving to myself that I was enough. And now, nothing could stop me. Everything had changed. And for the first time, I could finally breathe. As the weeks passed, the weight of everything that had changed slowly began to settle into a rhythm. My new role at Apple was everything I had dreamed of and more. I was working alongside brilliant minds, leading projects, and transforming the future of retail. The world I had once thought was beyond my reach was now mine to navigate. And yet, even with all the success, there was still something, somewhere, lingering in the back of my mind. It wasn't long before my family reached out again, asking for help. My parents were struggling to adjust to the changes in their store. The implementation of my system at Harris Electronics had flagged a number of issues, problems they had been hiding for years, sweeping them under the rug, hoping no one would notice. The new technology had uncovered not just inefficiencies, but unethical practices they had turned a blind eye to in the name of profit. I stared at the message from my father, asking for advice, asking for help. It felt surreal. Only a few months ago, they had been the ones dismissing me, the ones telling me that my dreams were childish. And now, they were the ones reaching out, hoping I would come to their rescue. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I prepared to respond. I knew what I had to do, but a part of me hesitated. My parents had been so certain they were right, so sure they knew what was best for me. And for so long, I had let their opinions define me. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I had built something real, something that had the power to expose the very things they had turned a blind eye to. In the end, I knew I couldn't help them. Not in the way they wanted. I couldn't fix their problems, couldn't protect them from the consequences of their actions. They had to face the truth, just like I had to face my own. I sent them a message, simple and clear: you need to adjust, just like everyone else. The system is designed to expose these issues because they hurt businesses like yours, the ones that have been turning a blind eye to unfair practices. I'm not going to fix this for you. You have to do it yourselves. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't trying to protect them or make excuses for their choices. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into the world of doubt and compromise. I had earned my place in this new world, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone hold me back. As I sent the message, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It was done. I wasn't the person who had to prove herself anymore. The work spoke for itself. And as for my family, they would have to adapt, just like everyone else. The next day, I received another message from Lila. "How does it feel?" she asked, her words simple, but filled with meaning. I smiled as I typed my reply: surreal. But right. As I sat in my new office, gazing out at the view of the city, I realized something. The people who had once doubted me, my family, my sister, even the world, were no longer part of the equation. This was my success, my journey, and the only validation I needed was the one I had given myself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but I was ready for them. The future was no longer something I had to wait for, it was something I had created. And no one, not even my own family, could take that away from me. Everything had changed, and in that change, I had found my true beginning.